Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you from wherever you are. My name is Justin Sears. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at TeamSense. And it's TeamSense Tuesday. We do webinars every Tuesday. This one's very exciting in the waning days of 2023. This is going to be our last webinar for the year. And I have with me Mr. Adam St Clair, who is a veteran in the manufacturing business and also a veteran seller, and I should say more importantly, a customer partner at TeamSense. Adam works with some of our oldest customers and biggest customers, and works with a lot of customers in the automotive industry. So that's today's topic: TeamSense Stories from the United Auto Workers Strike. Um, Adam, so good to be here with you today. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Me as well, Justin. And I appreciate the veteran intro. I've got the picture of my grandfather in the background, who is legitimately a veteran, and my son is super into war history right now, and so I'll have to play this back for him. He'll be proud of me for getting the veteran intro.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, that'll be a lowercase v because you haven't been on the battlefield, but you actually, you know, you've been on a battlefield of sorts recently, helping our customers in the automotive industry deal with some pretty tough times. But before we jump into that, I'd love you to share a little bit more about your background. You've worked in manufacturing, so tell me about how your experience on the plant floor helps you support our customers today in the automotive industry.
Yeah, man. Gosh, just thinking back about kind of my early days in career on the factory floor. Some of the fondest memories, honestly. Uh, there's something special about working on a factory floor, about adding value with your hands. Having these really tangible goals and deliverables. Like at the end of a workday, you can look at something that you've built or created, or this big pile of things ready to ship out to customers. And there's just this really gratifying and special feeling about working on a factory floor, adding value with your hands, and just all the camaraderie that goes along with doing that on a team. So, yeah, I mean, just a ton of
Where
fond
where
memories.
where where were you? Where did you work?
I worked at a manufacturing company called Fluke, so manufacturing test and measurement equipment. Interestingly enough, Fluke made tools that also kind of served a lot of the customers TeamSense is serving. So, yeah, test and measurement manufacturing.
Fantastic. And as you look back at your time at Fluke, now that you're at TeamSense and you're serving manufacturers and logistics companies with a product for folks that work in those sites, do you look back at your time at Fluke and say, "Oh man, I wish I'd had TeamSense when I was there"? Do you have any of those kind of flashback type memories?
Yeah, there's a few. I think, one in particular comes to mind, and interestingly enough, it's a Christmas story. So, for folks listening that don't have a ton of background on TeamSense, one of the things TeamSense does really well is creates kind of a digital connection or improves communication with hourly workers. Which, when my time on the factory floor, I felt that pain or that disconnect pretty poignantly. So, when I was on a factory floor, I didn't work at a computer. If I had a company email address, I had no idea how to log into it. And there were just often times where I felt disconnected, that I didn't have kind of my fingers on the pulse of what was going on, things that were available to me, just didn't have a really effective channel of communication where I felt plugged in and connected. So my Christmas story, and where this kind of overlaps with TeamSense is, I remember my first year at Fluke. I started in July, and so I had been there, a handful of months. We go through the holiday season. We do all of the amazing end of year stuff in manufacturing, like staying late to deliver for end of year. I leave. I take a couple of days off, family, whatever, and I come back and getting back into the mix, talking to my friends and coworkers on the factory floor, and it's the same conversations everybody has, right? Like, oh, how was your holiday season? What did you do? And I heard one of my buddies talking about the Lights of Christmas tickets that he got from Fluke, and Fluke did an amazing job of like creating opportunities for employees to get free tickets or events to local things. And I was like, what do you mean? Tickets to Light to Christmas? Like, I would have loved to do that, right? Like, how did you get hooked up with this? Like, what
Because you had a
special
young,
connections?
you had a young child at the time, right? You were
Yeah,
looking
trying
for
to
those type of
create
opportunities.
tradition, build tradition around Christmas, all of that kind of stuff, and not uh didn't have a ton of those traditions or things built yet. So anyways, I'm curious to my colleague, like, where'd you get these things? And I had no idea that Fluke had done this Lights of Christmas tickets handing out, because I just didn't have the information. I either didn't see or didn't recognize on the digital reader board the events that were available. I didn't see anything on the bulletin board in the break room, because you're just kind of going through the motions. It all looks very much the same. And so, having TeamSense or something that would help supplement some of the communication about what was available to me, to have not just communication about what's available at work, but some of the opportunities to help me get plugged in or do things outside of work. That would have been awesome. I would have loved year one to take my son to Lights of Christmas. I did go the next year, but I had to wait a bit.
Yeah, because I'm sure Fluke was, and they were there for the taking, right? You could have done that, and I'm sure they would have been happy for you to take advantage of that opportunity, but you just didn't know about it.
Yeah, just a lack of awareness. Yep.
Yeah. Well, so and let me just pause for a second. I forgot to mention in the beginning, there will be Q&A at the end. So send in questions in the Q&A in the meeting console. We'd love to take any questions you have. Um, so that's a great story, Adam. And recently, I've had the pleasure to visit customers with you on the road in two separate trips. We've been, I think, to Wisconsin, Michigan, Tennessee, Georgia, Kansas, Alabama. We've covered some ground.
Sure.
And we visited three separate automotive suppliers on the most recent trip, and that was, I guess, only a few weeks ago.
Yep.
So I remember talking with you when the United Auto Workers union went on strike in September. What did your client contacts do at that point? Did they reach out to you? Because that must have been
Mm.
it's a stressful time for folks. What was that like for you supporting those relationships, and what type of questions did you get?
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. The UAW strikes. There was a lot of lead up to, before the strikes actually happened. There was a lot of news, there was a lot of conversation, there was a lot of anticipation that there was, this upcoming likelihood of a strike. And so the conversations really started early. There was a mix of me being proactive and reaching out to customers and reminding them of tools that were available to them through TeamSense. And there was also customers kind of being proactive on their side and reaching out to me and saying, hey, this is how I'm thinking about using TeamSense to drive better communication or make sure that my employees are feeling engaged, involved, and in the know with what's going on. And so there was a lot of kind of anticipation, a lot of best practice sharing, a lot of kind of thinking strategically around how to use technology, in this case, TeamSense, to help them with what they believe to be upcoming with the UAW strikes. And a lot of the conversations were, how do we make sure that we have best in class communication with our hourly employees, and knowing that in times of difficulty, like, communication is paramount. And so that's what the conversations mostly were centered around: what's available and how do I use it to make sure that I create the best environment possible for my hourly teams.
And so you're swapping ideas, and I know that many of the companies that you work with were not they were not covered by UAW, but they were
Mm.
nevertheless going to be impacted by the strike. So they were affected, but not directly. Is that right? Many of them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so the way that, a lot of the automotive and automotive supplier kind of relationships work is, you've got often an automotive supplier site just down the street from an actual automaker, and so which are the unionized employees covered by the UAW, right? So you've got the automotive suppliers that are building these components to match the production schedules of these automakers. And so if a factory for an affected UAW site is shut down, the upstream impact then is, um, the components or the automotive suppliers that are building, the different pieces that go into this finished good, they're affected similarly, right? Like if there's no end product being made, there's no need for the components, or there's just not the physical space to house, all of these physical goods to just sit and wait. And so, yeah, the upstream impact with the automotive suppliers kind of mirrored what was happening at the UAW specific facilities.
That makes sense. And so you had a lot of hourly workers very anxiously watching the news. And I'm sure you mentioned the word communication. I'm sure the HR teams that you were in touch with were trying to figure out how to answer those questions. Tell me about some of the best practices or best ideas for communication that
Yeah.
you saw people doing with TeamSense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think I said earlier, like in times of stress and times of difficulty, communication is critical. And what more stressful than potentially losing your job, or being laid off or furloughed for some unknown period of time? uh, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and I know from being in that position, the kind of thinking I don't have a way to communicate well or get information easily, like that just compounds the stress. So I think one of the best practices that just like blew me away was is a gal. I'll spare the name of the company and this gal, but she was emphatic about being consistent and predictable
Mm,
around the communication, and she believed that that was going to be the most important thing. She said, Adam, even if we have to deliver a difficult message, if it is predictable when that message is going to be sent and it is consistent, then it's going to be well received by my employees. I can't control the message, but I can control the consistency and the predictability of the message, and that's going to be appreciated by the employees. So what was the best practice, I think was the question. The
yeah.
best practice was to set a schedule for when updates around the UAW and its impacts on our business were going to get sent out. So in this particular case, it was every Monday morning,
Hmm.
30 minutes before shifts started, uh, a message went out. And then the other time was, midweek, at the end of the day. And so what she did was she set the precedent with employees around, leading up to the strikes and then during kind of through the strike period, that every Monday morning they were going to get an update. Every Wednesday afternoon, they were going to get an update. And it helped create a sense of calm, a sense of ease, because I know this is coming. I don't have to go fight for it. I don't have to go ask. I don't
Hmm.
have to go try and hunt this information down. I know when it's coming. And so, uh, calendarized updates was best practice number one that stood out.
Yeah. And for people that might be listening to this for the first time, new to TeamSense, when you say communicate, remind
Yeah.
folks of the platform. How does that go out? Where do people get that information? How easy is that?
Yeah, so TeamSense operates primarily on text message, and so again, kind of a really impactful channel for communication with the hourly teams, right? Like even if emails were going out, even if intranets were getting updated, hourly workers often don't have access to that channel of communication, and so TeamSense primarily through
Like
text.
when you were at Fluke, same type of situation.
Yeah, Lights of Christmas, less consequential than my job, but yes, same barriers, right, for effective communication.
And it goes two ways. So you're talking about communication, but when we were chatting, I think it was on the road somewhere in Tennessee when we were talking about this. There's also the ability to gather information
Mm.
from workers. How was that used leading up to and during the strike?
Yeah, yeah. So, and another, I guess, best practice, really, just thinking about some of the creative and thoughtful ideas that our customers have, and often it's our customers that have the best ideas. Like they're coming to us with like a framework and understanding for TeamSense the technology, and then they're layering on their amazing human ideas and capabilities and saying, hey, can we imagine if we did this? So example there, a lot of the automotive suppliers did end up unfortunately having to lay people off, and there was a lot of effort going into kind of understanding how to make that transition both easy for the employee, comfortable for the employee, as comfortable as possible. But there was also a concerted effort to make sure that there was kind of an understanding for their intentions moving forward, right? Because there's a war for talent going on out there in automotive supplier or automotive industry and everywhere else. And so if you've got a portion of the workforce leaving, even if it's just for a week or two, there's a huge risk there. Like,
You
are
don't know
they
if
going to
you
go?
don't know if they're coming back.
You don't know if they're coming back. And so, TeamSense, in addition to kind of sending messages out, also, like you said, has the ability to capture structured information back. And so, in preparation for some of these layoffs, I was working with some customers to start thinking about how do we craft a set of kind of information gather, what we call forms, to go out, one, to keep laid off employees engaged with what's going on, but also to understand their intentions, asking questions like, hey, do you intend to come back?
Mm.
What is the period of time that you are either able to or comfortable with being laid off before you seek other forms of employment, or whatever the case may be? And so we were thinking about and crafting these forms to gather information from employees to understand their intentions about staying employed with their current company. And that was incredibly helpful, both, like I said, for the employer to have visibility and understand what to do next, but also to create this really kind of most empathetic touch point with their employees, right? Like, they care about retaining me as an employee. They care about what's important to me. They understand that, like, I may be forced to look for something else during this time. And so it creates this really human touch that's beneficial on both sides.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure people didn't feel taken for granted, right? If you don't have any communication, it's silence, and you might not feel wanted. And the exact opposite is true. The GMs of those sites, they're thinking, hey, once we ramp back up, we're gonna have to
Mm.
make up time in the air, and we're gonna need all our skilled people on day one, not have to
And
scramble.
that totally happened. It totally happened, right? Like, the strikes ended, and guess what? Like, demand signal spike, right? Like, get the parts coming in. And not only does it just kind of like ramp back up to where it was, we got to make up for lost time.
Mm.
Right? So having a fully staffed uh, factory floor, operating on 3 shifts, operating often 6-7 days a week, like, yeah, how costly and impactful would that be to those companies to not be fully staffed? So
Right.
not just the costs of hiring and backfilling, but then the impacts of being shorthanded when you're trying to make up for lost time.
Let's talk about that, the coming back moment, because we really believe in supporting our customers, and our customer success team works really closely with our existing customers. What were what did you and our customer success team do during the strike to actually prepare for? I mean, I think we all knew it was going to end at some point. Like,
Yeah.
did you work with them to get ready for that? And what advantages in our product made that rapid response uh, in a time of uncertainty possible?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. There was a ton of collaboration during and after that time. I think the thing that came out of it that stood out to me most was um, the difficult time of the strikes and the impact on hourly workers and the industry in general. It was kind of like this catalyst that solidified uh, communication as is a really, really important thing. And like I know that effective communication, like it shows up on employee engagement surveys all the time. And like it's not a new thing that people want to be communicated with and feel like they're connected in the know. But I think the thing that the conversations that me, our customers, customer success had coming out of the UAW strike was um, the ones that did it best. They used a difficult moment in time to
Mm-hmm.
kind of and the way that they showed up within that difficulty actually ended up being a positive. And you said like what's the TeamSense product connection? It really is just the communication, the consistency of communication, the willingness to communicate even when the message is difficult. And so now now you've got the employee's attention.
Mm-hmm.
When my phone buzzes and I'm getting a text message from my employer, the message matters. The message is relevant to me. The update and the information is important. And so using using TeamSense and the technology to show up effectively during a time when you've got everybody's attention, then kind of prepared them for using that channel of communication and those best practices, the consistency, the predictability, the relevancy, to then going to help them with other things that are also important, maybe less scary, but also important, like open enrollment or
Yeah,
other.
I was just thinking that that's the funny thing because we're talking about something that was somewhat predicted, but it was a point in time. Open enrollment happens every year, and that was happening right around the same time, right? So how did
Yeah, for a lot of companies, yes.
HR is balancing sort of this emergency situation with, oh, we do this thing every year, and
Yeah.
they could communicate about both those things with TeamSense, right?
Yeah, I think the UAW strikes solidified text as an effective and important communication channel with these companies, and then it just supported, using that channel for all kinds of different things. And open enrollment for a lot of companies just kind of happened to be right on the heels of it. So yeah, I saw those things kind of interplay pretty effectively together. You've got their attention, right? They know what to expect. They know, like I said, when their phone rings or their phone buzzes, like there's something for me that matters to me, that impacts me.
That's great. Well, I've seen a couple of questions come in. I want to make sure I hold time for that, but I do
Yeah,
want to
sure.
one more question before we get in the Q&A. Keep sending questions, audience. Thank you very much for that. Um, we've talked about unionized and non-unionized sites, and I know that we work with customers that are both union shops and not unionized.
Mhm.
Talk to me about, and you've worked with some of those. Talk to me about the sites that have union, and how does the union feel about TeamSense? What is that
Mm.
experience like?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know that there's actually like a fundamental difference.
Hmm.
And I don't know, backtrack a little bit. Like, keep me honest here. I don't want to dance around too much. Like, I want to answer your question, but like my initial reaction, Justin, is like union or not, it's people at the end of the day,
Right.
right? And people want the same things, whether they're, a part of some collective group or not. Like generally, people want to be communicated with. People want to have access to information. And so I don't know that there's some fundamental difference between our unionized customers and our non-unionized customers.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
just like in their overall desire to just be connected, right? And to be communicated with and to feel a part of something and in the know. But what's interesting about unions is often because unions have what are called CBAs or collective bargaining agreements where you get like the collective view represented and written down on paper. So you kind of get this insider view of the collective opinion or perspective of some group of people. And I did see recently in a CBA that text was called out specifically as a requirement for a communication channel. And so I think what that says to me is that you've got this group of people collaboratively thinking about the things that are important to them or their preferences for how they're going to be communicated with, and then that gets surfaced in a CBA. So I don't think it's actually that different, other than you've got some written rules around preferences for a group of people. So I think that I think was the most interesting thing, is like text is universal.
Yeah.
It's an effective communication channel across multiple generations, across multiple industries, across union and non-union. But you see,
Automotive and non-automotive. I know
sure,
we serve lots of manufacturing and logistics companies that don't have anything to do with the automotive industry, but communication is probably the steel thread. I don't know if that's the
yeah,
right metaphor that is consistent.
yeah. People are people, and often there's trends and similarities. Uh, CBAs or unions offer us kind of a unique insight into the specifics for what people prefer in the workplace.
All right, that's fantastic. So let's get to Q&A. Thank you all for sending in questions. I've got one here that is, you've been talking about the automotive supply chain. I saw one of your blog posts talk about third-party logistics. What about automotive companies? Do you work with them on logistics as well, or just manufacturing? Explain, and this is me ad-libbing here. Explain to us, Adam,
Yeah.
about because I know it's all connected.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to the previous point. I mean, people are people, and often kind of appreciate and move in similar directions around things like communication. TeamSense is for the hourly worker, and there are hourly workers in manufacturing, automotive, and otherwise, and logistics similarly. I think the dynamics are very similar, and we were Justin, when we were on site, we did visit a logistics customer, and it looks similar in that nobody's sitting on a computer. You're adding value with your hands. There's a lot of similarities in manufacturing, multiple kind of vectors of manufacturing, as well as logistics, just in the hourly population, the tools that are available to them, their preferences for communication. And so yes, a lot of the same things apply, and TeamSense serves manufacturing and logistics companies alike.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question here. How long does it usually take for a new site to get up and running with TeamSense?
Mm. Uh, Average is less than 48 hours. It's
Really?
listen,
Wow.
that and this again, coming from ex factory worker, it has to be simple. Like, if it's not simple, it's not going to be used. And simple across the board, not just simple in like the user interface for the hourly employee, simple for implementation, simple for the user interface, simple for getting information on the back end. I have a unique privilege. I actually met our founder and CEO at Fluke. So she has a similar manufacturing background. Um, and that's just one of the founding kind of principles of TeamSense.
Mhm.
It has to be simple. And so we focus a ton, not just on how to make it simple for the user, but how to make it simple from when you say, like, I need this, to start realizing the benefits. Simple across the board, less than 48 hours.
That's very cool. And last question, and maybe it's related to that a little bit. Does TeamSense only do text, or do you have something for workers who prefer to call or email when they can't come in?
Mm. Yeah, so in addition to a lot of the communication and information gather that TeamSense can do, our one of our core use cases or workflows is actually the call off process. So I'm not going to make it into work today. I've got to report my absence using TeamSense automation to communicate and then kind of drive the cross functional communication. So employees reporting absences can text, they can call, they can email. Simple through all of those different communication channels. But interestingly enough, like this came from one of our unionized customers and their CBA. They said,
Hmm.
we have to have a call-in option to report an absence. And so, in addition to text, we built the ability for employees to report an absence through calling in. Another interesting data point, though, um, we look at usage data and how employees are reporting absences. And even though we stood up that technology, there's such a strong kind of human preference or behavior tendency toward text message that it's north of 95% of employees using TeamSense usually prefer and use text as the communication channel, even though there's other kind of channels available.
And even if they're calling in, it's still capturing that information in a structured way so the company can look at all of that information as apples to apples.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Different channel for hourly employee, but all funneling back into kind of the same structured data set on the back end. Uh-huh.
Well, Adam, as always, this has been fantastic. That's all the questions we have for today. We did it just about on time. Really want to thank you for taking time. I know you're busy. It's end of year, and you're working with customers to bring some last deals to closure. Really want to thank you for taking the time. Just some housekeeping stuff. Um, Also want to thank all of you who joined this webinar. Want to wish everybody a very safe and happy holidays. And we will be taking 2 weeks off. If you're a TeamSense Tuesday webinar devotee and you're here every Tuesday, we won't be here for the next 2 Tuesdays because we're going to be taking some time off with our families as well. However, when we get back on January 9th, a very exciting customer spotlight webinar. I know that those are some of our audience's favorite webinars is hearing from customers. We're going to have Cassandra Cammons, the Chief Human Resources Officer for U.S. Operations at Clayens. I think that's one of your accounts also, right, Adam?
Cassandra's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. She was originally at Parkway Products, which was acquired by Clayens. So she's got a great story and perspective to share there. And Clayens is a global leader in the injection molding industry. So a different type of manufacturing than maybe some of the stuff we talked about today. But hope everyone can join us on January 9th. Encourage you to sign up for that. That page is live. We'll do some promotion beforehand. Again, Adam, thank you. Thank you, attendees. Happy holidays, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Justin.